The harbor was too quiet that morning, the kind of quiet that feels like a warning, not peace. Emily Carter, wrapped in her bright red jacket under the summer sun, stood frozen at the edge of the pier. Beside her, Rex, the police dog, who had guarded the abandoned island for years, shifted suddenly, ears pricked, muscles coiled tight. For months, Emily had avoided the truth the dog had been trying to show her. But today, the sea refused to stay silent. A strange wail drifted from the island, riding on the wind, and Rex pressed against her arm, amber eyes burning with the weight of a promise she hadn't dared to face. Emily swallowed hard, then spoke. Her first words since the night she stepped onto that cursed island. And what she said sent a ripple of fear through all of Clearwater Bay. If this story moves you, don't forget to subscribe and follow our journey. Clearwater Bay, Florida, was a place where summer never softened. By late June, the air turned into a shimmering veil of heat, thick with the scent of salt and engine oil drifting from the fishing docks. The sun hammered down on the white sidewalks until they glowed like polished bone, and every afternoon, the horizon blurred into a hot silver line where the ocean breathed slow and heavy. Gulls screeched overhead, diving for scraps around the harbor district, an old waterfront lined with weather-beaten bait shops, pastel-painted houses, and palm trees bent by years of stubborn sea winds. Beneath this relentless sky, Emily Carter walked the same wooden pier every morning. She was 29, with long chestnut-brown hair that curled at the ends from humidity and ocean spray, and bright blue eyes that made people think she was always moments away from a new idea or a new disaster. Emily wasn't the glamorous kind of beautiful. She was the restless kind. Sunshine kissed freckles across her cheeks, and she moved with a blend of curiosity and caution, as though always balancing between wanting adventure and wanting to stay invisible. The only thing in her life that never changed was her clothing. She always wore red. Sometimes a red sundress, sometimes a red jacket thrown loosely over shorts, but always the same fiery color, something she had adopted years ago while trying to make her vlog stand out. "Wear one thing they'll never forget," an old mentor once told her. Red became her armor, her brand, and on most days, her courage. Her morning routine looked simple from the outside. Walk the pier, film a short vlog, breathe deeply, and pretend the world wasn't too loud. But inside, Emily carried a quiet exhaustion. Her father had passed 3 summers ago, leaving her alone with a small apartment overlooking the harbor and a habit of bottling every emotion. She took comfort in routines because routines didn't ask her to feel anything, until Rex appeared. The first time Emily saw him, she thought he was a statue. The German shepherd sat perfectly still at the far end of the pier, large and imposing, with a thick, sun-touched coat the color of dark gold and charcoal. His ears were erect, his legs steady, and his posture flawless, like a soldier standing guard on forgotten ground. Up close he was even more striking, amber eyes sharp and expressive, a deep scar running across his left flank, and a leather collar scratched with years of service. Rex was no ordinary stray. He was a trained K9, maybe 7 or 8 years old, with the rigid discipline of a dog who had known commands, danger, and loyalty so intense it became a way of life. But he never begged for food, never wandered, never chased seagulls or barked at boats. He simply stared, every single morning, toward the small, uninhabited island 2 miles offshore. The island was a lonely patch of land with a rusted lighthouse and the remains of an old research shack. Locals rarely talked about it, except in half-joking whispers. Bad Luck Island, they called it. Leave it alone. Emily had lived in Clearwater Bay for years and never once seen a boat heading that way. One afternoon at the pier, she overheard two elderly fishermen talking as they cleaned their nets. The first was Mr. Hollis, a short, sunburned man with wispy gray hair. The second, a taller and heavier fellow named Ben Ortiz, whose round belly and booming laugh could be heard across the harbor. That dog belonged to Mark Reynolds, Hollis muttered, wiping sweat from his brow. Good officer, real good. Went missing on that island during a case no one ever solved. Ben nodded gravely, his dark eyebrows drawing close. And that dog's been watching the island ever since. Won't leave the pier. Won't let anyone drag him away either. Emily didn't interrupt, but something in her chest tightened. She didn't know Officer Mark Reynolds personally, but she remembered seeing his picture years ago. A tall, broad-shouldered man with a chiseled jaw, sandy blonde hair, and steady gray eyes. People said he was the kind of officer who remembered everyone's birthday and always brought donuts for the rookies, the kind who became a hero without realizing it. His disappearance had shaken the entire city. Emily crouched beside Rex that day, speaking softly. So you're waiting for him, huh? Rex didn't look at her. His gaze stayed locked on the distant island, unblinking. Emily laughed nervously. If you're waiting this long, it must be love, or a giant secret. She didn't expect an answer, at least not until the evening the world changed. That day, the sun dipped low, turning the sky into waves of red and orange that matched Emily's jacket. She decided to leave early, tired from filming, and turned toward the parking lot. Behind her, the pier groaned softly under the weight of the tide. Then, 3 sharp barks split the air. Emily froze. She looked back. Rex, who had never reacted to her presence for weeks, had suddenly sprung to his feet. His hackles rose. His body leaned forward, powerful and urgent. He stared at Emily, directly, intensely, then turned his head toward the island and barked again. 3 loud, deliberate barks that echoed across the water. Emily's breath caught in her throat. For the first time, she realized something impossible. Rex wasn't just watching the island. Rex was choosing her. The morning after Rex's unexpected bark still echoed in her chest. Emily Carter woke with the sharp brightness of Clearwater Bay piercing through her window blinds. Summer here didn't wake gently. It crashed into the room like a tidal wave, filling the air with thick heat and the distant hum of boat engines already leaving the harbor. Emily slipped into her usual red jacket, the fabric light but vibrant enough to catch the sun, and tied her hair back to keep the salty breeze from whipping it into her eyes. She scanned her reflection briefly. Tired expression, but a determined tilt in her chin. Rex had chosen her, or so she believed, and she wasn't the type to ignore something that felt like destiny. She spent the next few hours gathering information about Officer Mark Reynolds. Her first stop was the Clearwater Bay Public Library, a squat building painted sea green, staffed by a woman named Sarah Middleton, the head librarian. Sarah was in her mid-50s, tall and slender, with silver-streaked black hair pinned into a loose bun, and a sharp, angular face that made her pale blue eyes stand out. She had a quiet, precise way of speaking, as though every word passed through a filter of logic. Years earlier, she had lost her husband to a boating accident, and since then she had developed a wary attitude toward anything involving the sea. When Emily mentioned Mark's name, Sarah sighed softly, her fingers hesitating on the keyboard. "Good man," she murmured. too good. People like him always end up tangled in someone else's sins. Sarah fetched old newspaper clippings and digital records. The story was consistent. Mark Reynolds had led a mission to apprehend a human trafficking ring, rumored to be using the offshore island as a transit point. A storm hit unexpectedly. Communication failed. A rescue team later found nothing but an overturned boat and scattered debris. The case was closed quietly, too quietly. Emily felt unease pooling in her stomach. Sarah noticed. "If you're digging," the librarian warned, "dig carefully." By afternoon, Emily was back on the pier. The planks were so hot, they nearly burned through the soles of her sandals. Rex was already there in his usual place, rigid but calm, staring toward the island like a captain waiting for a ship that never arrived. When Emily approached with a small bag of food, grilled chicken and leftover rice, Rex flicked his ears and turned his head just enough to acknowledge her, a gesture that felt almost like a bow. He ate slowly, daintily even, but his eyes drifted back to the distant island with every swallow. Emily sat beside him, the salty breeze pulling at her red sleeves. "You're still waiting," she whispered. "Waiting for him or waiting for something else?" Rex didn't answer, but his stillness felt loaded with purpose. That night, Emily stepped onto the narrow balcony outside her apartment. The city below was alive, neon fish signs flickering, cars rolling lazily through the harbor roads, and music drifting from the tiki bar 2 blocks down. She held a mug of iced tea and breathed deeply, letting the wind thread through her hair. The ocean, however, was eerily dark, almost too calm. Then she froze. A faint light flickered from the direction of the island. Once, twice, 3 times. Weak, erratic, but unmistakably deliberate, like someone signaling through the blackout. Her phone buzzed violently in her hand. A message from an unknown number appeared. "Don't trust the reports. The island was never abandoned." Emily's breath stuttered. She looked up again, but the light was gone. The next morning, she marched into the Clearwater Bay Police Department, a gray concrete building with faded blue trim. Inside, the air conditioning blasted cold enough to make her skin prickle. She approached the reception counter and found Sergeant William Hayes, a middle-aged officer with a square jaw, heavy stubble, and shoulders thick from years of training. His hair was a dull, sandy brown, cut short and practical. He was the polite but firm type, the kind who followed rules not because he liked them, but because breaking them once, long ago, had cost him someone he cared about. When Emily asked to reopen Officer Mark Reynolds' case, Hayes's expression hardened. "The case is closed," he said. His voice was gravelly, tired. "And that island is restricted. No civilian access. End of discussion." Emily argued, calmly at first, then with the heat rising in her voice, but Hayes only repeated himself. "Let it go, Miss Carter." His eyes flicked to Rex, who had followed her inside and now lay by the door like a patient shadow. When Hayes mentioned the word restricted, Rex lifted his head, ears pricked, body tensing. Emily noticed. So did Hayes. Something unspoken passed between them, and Hayes shifted uncomfortably. "Just leave it alone," he muttered before turning away. Hours later, Emily returned to the pier. The sun was low, casting gold over the water. She didn't expect anything unusual, but as soon as she stepped onto the dock, Rex stood up sharply. He strode toward her, not aimlessly, but with a plan. He grabbed a rope tied to a small, weathered rowboat and tugged, dragging it a few inches across the pier. Then he looked at Emily, eyes glowing with unmistakable urgency. It wasn't a plea. It was an order. Emily's heart pounded as she touched the boat's edge. The wind whipped her red dress behind her. Out on the horizon, the abandoned island lay still beneath the setting sun, silent and waiting, as though it had been holding its breath just for them. And in that moment, Emily understood. Rex didn't just want her attention. He wanted her to follow. The moon hung low over Clearwater Bay, a pale silver coin pressed against the sky, casting its cold glow across the restless ocean. The heat of daytime had dissolved into a humid, heavy night air that clung to Emily Carter's skin as she stood at the end of the pier. Her red jacket, bright as fire in daylight, looked darker now, almost wine-colored beneath the moon. She tightened it around her shoulders, feeling the wind pick up from the open sea. Tonight was reckless, dangerous, illegal. But the moment Rex had tugged that boat toward her, she knew there was no turning back. Rex stood steady beside her, the German shepherd's powerful frame outlined in moonlight. His coat appeared almost metallic, gold glinting under the silver glow, and his stance was alert, tail stiff, ears pricked toward the dark outline of the island. His age showed only in a few gray strands near his muzzle, but his eyes gleamed sharp with purpose. He moved with the certainty of a creature who had walked this path before, long ago. Emily secured the small flashlight and old radio into her backpack, checked the life jacket strapped against her chest, and pushed the rowboat into the water. The wooden hull groaned before settling onto the waves. She climbed in, Rex leaping aboard behind her with practiced ease. As Emily rowed, the city behind them shrank to a scatter of warm lights, while ahead, the silhouette of the island slowly grew, an uneven shape rising from the water like the spine of some ancient creature. The island was nothing like the bright beaches Florida was known for. Its rocky base jutted harshly from the water, surrounded by tangles of mangrove roots gripping the shoreline like skeletal fingers. An old lighthouse towered at the center, rusted, tilting, its glass long shattered. Up close, its metal ribs poked through the remaining panels, creating a jagged outline that resembled a giant rib cage. Emily shuddered. The place looked abandoned, but not empty. As their boat scraped the shore, Rex jumped off first, nose low, body tense. Emily followed cautiously, her shoes sinking slightly into damp sand. The bushes rustled with insects, and somewhere deep within the island, something creaked, like a door shifting on broken hinges. Rex took the lead, following an overgrown path through wild shrubs and low-hanging branches. Every few meters he paused to sniff the dirt, tail held stiff. His behavior struck Emily. This wasn't simple curiosity. This was recognition. Memory. They reached a clearing where a scattering of objects lay half-buried beneath leaves, a metal can with fresh markings, a shoe print barely larger than Emily's palm, delicate enough to belong to a child, and caught in a thorny bush, a torn strip of cloth, a dull red scrap frayed at the edges. Emily touched it gently. It was nearly the same shade as her jacket. A cold ripple moved through her chest. "Someone's been here," she whispered. A gust of wind rattled the trees as though answering her. They came upon the ruined wooden structure next. It was small, maybe once a lookout shed or a research cabin. Rot had eaten through most of the walls, and one corner of the roof sagged inward. Emily approached with caution, shining her flashlight through a missing plank. Dust particles danced in the beam. Inside, scattered across the warped floor, were torn notebooks, maps drawn in frantic strokes, and papers held down by stones. The writing was rushed, nearly illegible. "Don't leave the island. They're still here." Another note. "If anyone finds this, take the girl. Don't trust someone in the force." Emily felt cold sweat prick her back. She didn't know who wrote these notes, perhaps Mark Reynolds himself, but each line carried the same heavy dread. She stepped onto the creaking boards, careful not to break through. Rex followed, but halfway across the room, the dog abruptly froze. His hackles rose. A low growl vibrated in his chest. Emily halted. "What is it?" she whispered. Rex didn't look at her. His gaze locked onto a section of the floorboards near the far corner. Boards darker, weaker, as if something had scratched beneath them. Then Emily heard it too. A faint sound. A shuffle. A tiny gasp. The unmistakable tremble of someone, or something, breathing through fear. Emily crouched down slowly, lifted her flashlight, and aimed its narrow beam through the cracks between the boards. Dust swirled. Then, a small, dirt-smeared hand shot up through the narrow space, fingers trembling. The nails were cracked, the skin scraped raw. Tiny, muffled whimpers escaped from below. Emily jerked back in shock, nearly dropping the flashlight. Rex snarled, taking a defensive stance, but not in aggression, in warning. His body shielded Emily, as though he recognized the smell of danger rising from below. Emily's pulse hammered in her ears. She wasn't sure if the hand belonged to a frightened child seeking help, or something much darker waiting to pull her in. Either way, the island was no longer whispering. It was reaching for her, and she wasn't ready for what it wanted. Emily's pulse quickened as the trembling hand below the floorboards clutched at empty air, reaching for her or for help. She couldn't tell which. Rex growled low, his body angled protectively in front of her, his tail stiff, his amber eyes locked on the shadow beneath the cracked planks. After one steadying breath, Emily knelt beside the gap and pushed her fingers under the edge of a loose board. It resisted at first, swollen from years of moisture, but with Rex bracing his paws and pressing his weight down, the wood finally cracked upward. One board, then another, until a dark rectangular opening yawned before them, a stairwell descending into the earth, the smell of mold and salt rising like a buried memory. Rex descended first, his movements careful but confident. Emily followed close behind, gripping the rusty handrail with one hand and her flashlight with the other. The narrow steps creaked under her weight, sounding almost like faint cries echoing up from the darkness. The air grew colder the deeper they went, thick with humidity, tinged with rust and something softer, the scent of old fabric, of breath, of fear. At the bottom was a small underground room, barely tall enough for Emily to stand in. The walls were stone, irregularly shaped, where water had dripped and dried into jagged streaks. She swept her flashlight slowly across the space, and her breath hitched. There, curled in a corner on a thin blanket, was a child. She was a small girl, maybe 8 or 9, wearing a torn blue dress that hung off her thin frame. Dirt smeared her cheeks, and her dark hair fell in tangled waves over her shoulders. Her limbs were too slender, her eyes hollow and wide from nights spent crying. When she tried to stand, her knees wobbled, and she pressed one hand against the ground to steady herself. Her voice cracked as she whispered, "Don't hurt me." Emily stepped forward gently, lowering her flashlight so the beam wouldn't blind the child. "It's okay. We're not here to hurt you." She glanced at Rex, who had already lowered himself, his posture soft, ears tilted back in reassurance. "My name is Emily. What's yours?" The girl swallowed hard. Lily, she stammered. Emily's heart clenched. Lily looked far too fragile to have survived in this place alone. She knelt, keeping her movements slow. "How long have you been down here?" Lily hugged her knees. "I don't know, days? Weeks? Longer, maybe?" Her voice was hoarse, her throat strained as if unused. "I was taken here by bad people. They brought others, too. I heard them cry. Then no more crying." Emily's stomach twisted, but she forced her voice to stay calm. "Did someone help you hide here?" Lily nodded slowly. "Officer Mark. He tried to save us. He said we'd go home soon, but then the loud men came back. He hid me here. He told the dog to stay with me." She glanced at Rex. "He told him, 'Guard the girl. Don't leave until someone good comes.'" Rex shifted, as if remembering the moment exactly. Emily's throat tightened. She reached out and brushed Lily's shoulder. "He was brave. And Rex was brave too." The girl nodded, tears forming. "He said he'd come back, but he didn't." Emily swallowed hard. This was the confirmation she dreaded yet needed. Mark Reynolds didn't vanish without cause. He had been silenced. Emily tried her radio, adjusting the dial, but the speaker hissed with heavy static. No voices, no signal. The walls buried them too deep. She lifted the device higher, then moved toward the stairs. The static grew louder, then softer. "Someone's jamming it," she muttered. Her voice cut off when a loud metallic slam vibrated through the ceiling above them. It echoed down the stairwell, rattling dust loose. Lily shrieked and scrambled backward, pressing into the corner. Rex barked sharply, leaping toward the stairs. Emily spun around, shining her flashlight upward, but darkness swallowed the top. "Someone just closed the hatch," she whispered. A second metallic sound followed. This time, the distinct clack of a lock turning into place. Emily's pulse pounded in her ears. "They know we're here." Footsteps thudded across the cabin floor above. Measured, heavy steps belonging to at least 2 men. Their voices were low, muffled. One tone was deep, gravelly, impatient. The other was quieter, sharper, the cadence firm and authoritative. Then a third sound, a single set of boots stepping confidently, like the owner wasn't sneaking, but claiming a ground he already controlled. Rex stiffened. His head snapped upward. His ears flattened, not in fear, but in recognition. Emily whispered, "You know that voice, don't you?" Above them, the footsteps paused directly over the hatch. A faint creak traveled through the dusty boards. Then a scraping noise. Someone was crouching. A beam of harsh white light burst through the narrow ventilation slit overhead, landing squarely on Emily's face. She flinched, raising an arm to block the glare. "Emily Carter," a familiar male voice called down, slow and deliberate. "You shouldn't have come to this island." Rex snarled, baring his teeth, his entire body tensed like a bowstring ready to snap. Emily's breath caught. The voice belonged to someone she trusted, and he just locked them underground. The darkness in the underground room felt heavier after the man's voice faded. Dust still drifted through the thin beam of light from the vent, and the lock above them throbbed like a heartbeat in the silence. Emily pressed one hand to the damp wall, steadying her breath. If she froze now, they would die down here. If she panicked, Lily would panic. And Rex would never forgive himself for failing twice. "We're getting out," Emily whispered, voice firm though her stomach churned. "All of us." She pulled off her red jacket and knotted the sleeves together, then twisted the fabric again to make a longer rope. It wasn't much, but it was something. She tied the makeshift rope to a jutting pipe low on the wall, tugging to test its strength. Rex hovered close, sensing her plan even before she spoke. His posture was tense, tail stiff, eyes sharp in the dim light. But there was hope, too. "Find a way out, boy," Emily said. And he understood. Rex lowered his head, sniffing along the walls. After a few passes, he stopped near a section where stone met rotting wood, paws scraping urgently. Emily dropped to her knees. "There's something behind that." Together, they pulled at the loose boards, fingers and claws tearing at softened wood until a small gap opened, a tunnel leading deeper underground. Lily hesitated, hugging herself, but Emily reached out, brushing the girl's hair gently. "It's just another path. We follow Rex." Lily nodded weakly. They crawled through single file, the tunnel cramped and cold, with roots dangling overhead like skeletal fingers. The air smelled of earth and brine. After several minutes, the passage widened, ending in a narrow slit in the rock. Beyond it, faint moonlight shimmered. They pushed through and emerged on a ledge carved into the island's cliffside. Waves below crashed with fury against jagged stone, sending mist into the air. Emily shielded her eyes, trembling with the shock of open sky. "We made it out," Lily whispered. "Not yet," Emily answered, scanning the shore. "We still have to reach higher ground." Above them, Rex barked twice and darted toward a natural slope leading up the cliff. Emily lifted Lily onto her back and followed, clinging to the uneven surface. Behind them, the sea roared like something alive. Meanwhile, at the top of the island, the traitor was pacing. Detective Colin Mercer, the man Emily once greeted politely at the station, looked different now, wild, frantic. A tall man in his 40s, Mercer usually carried a sharp and polished look at the precinct. Dark brown hair combed neatly, a trimmed goatee that outlined his firm jaw, and cold hazel eyes that rarely showed emotion. But tonight, his hair clung to his forehead with sweat, and those hazel eyes flicked in every direction. His years in narcotics had hardened him. Emily knew that. But she never imagined the bitterness that brewed inside him. A failed undercover op years ago, the loss of 2 partners he blamed on the department, and debts owed to the wrong people had twisted his loyalty. And Mark Reynolds had discovered the truth. Mercer kicked a stone off the cliff. His boat was coming. He had called his employers to finish what should have been finished years ago. "Clean it up," they told him. "No more loose ends." He didn't know Rex had a GPS tracker. He didn't know Emily had activated emergency mode the moment she saw the first glimmer of moonlight through the escape tunnel. And he didn't know the one officer in Clearwater Bay who still believed in Mark Reynolds was already racing toward the island. When Emily, Lily, and Rex reached the top, Mercer turned sharply at the sound of gravel crunching. His eyes widened with disbelief and anger. "You just don't know when to quit," he spat. He pulled a gun from his waistband, aiming at Emily with a shaking hand. "You weren't supposed to find her. You weren't supposed to find any of this." Emily shielded Lily behind her. Her voice cracked but stayed bold. "Mark died protecting her, and you—" "Mark was naive," Mercer roared. "He should have stayed quiet." The gun clicked as he tightened his grip. Rex growled, low and lethal. Mercer stepped closer, raising the barrel toward Emily's chest. "I can still fix this," he hissed. "One shot." But he never finished. Rex lunged with explosive force, slamming into Mercer's arm. The gun flew from his grip, skidding across the rocky ground. Mercer fell hard, choking on his own breath as Rex bared his teeth an inch from his throat. Then, sirens. Deafening, rising from the ocean. Blue and red lights swept across the cliff. A police speedboat cut through the waves, and leaping from its deck was Officer Jenna Morales, a trusted colleague of Mark, and one of the few Emily had contacted earlier. Jenna was in her early 30s, strong and athletic, with tightly curled black hair pulled into a bun and warm brown skin now slick with seawater. She was known for her sharp instincts and fierce loyalty, traits shaped after losing her own brother to a trafficking ring years ago. She sprinted up the cliff with a team of special units behind her. "Hands where I can see them!" Jenna shouted. Mercer froze beneath Rex's weight before officers tackled and restrained him. The danger was over. But the grief was not. Over the next hours, evidence was gathered, confessions recorded. Mercer broke down, revealing how Mark had discovered his corruption, how Mark tried to save Lily, how he died shielding her, and how Rex had stayed faithful to Mark's last command. The island was sealed, the case reopened, and this time finished. Lily was placed with a loving foster family in Clearwater Bay, a couple gentle and patient enough to help her heal. Emily visited often, bringing chocolates, books, and tiny red dresses that made Lily smile shyly. Rex was honored as a hero, the canine guardian of the island. And, though older now, he stood proudly during the ceremony, tail wagging at Emily's side. Emily adopted him officially, but Rex continued serving as a trusted canine consultant for the department, a role he carried with quiet dignity. Weeks later, on a soft summer evening, Emily stood on the pier in her crimson dress. Rex sat beside her, the wind ruffling his fur. They looked toward the island, not with fear or sorrow, but with peace. A memorial stone now stood beneath the old lighthouse bearing Mark Reynolds' name. Emily placed a hand on Rex's neck and whispered, "Your mission is over, soldier. Now we live for the ones who never got the chance." Rex didn't turn toward the island. He looked only at her, tail brushing the planks in a slow, faithful rhythm, promising a long, quiet summer ahead. In the end, what happened on that lonely island wasn't just a rescue, or justice, or the triumph of courage. It was a reminder that sometimes, when the world feels dark and forgotten, God sends his miracles in unexpected forms. A brave police dog who refused to surrender, a lost child who kept hope alive, and a woman in red who listened to a calling that wasn't meant for her, yet answered it anyway. Maybe that's how it works in our everyday lives, too. Maybe miracles don't always arrive with thunder or angels. Sometimes they come quietly, in loyalty, in love, in the courage to step forward when fear tells us to turn away. And sometimes they come on four paws, carrying the last prayer of someone who never made it home. If this story touched something in your heart, I invite you to share it with someone who needs hope today. Leave a comment below, subscribe for more stories of faith and courage, and may God watch over you and your family, just as he watched over Emily, Rex, and the little girl who survived because a miracle refused to give up. May God bless every one of you watching.